Welcome. You're listening to Ask the Doulas, a podcast where we talk to experts from all over the country about topics related to pregnancy, birth, postpartum, and early parenting. Let's chat.
Hello. This is Kristin with Ask the Doulas, and I am thrilled to chat with Dr. Gertrude Lyons today. Our topic is all about intuitive mothering. And over the last 20 plus years, Dr. Lyons has worked to empower individuals, couples, parents, and families toward fulfilled lives. Her diverse certifications and training enable her to offer a tailored, integrative approach catering to the needs of these individuals and groups. Dr. Lyons has many credentials: a doctorate in education, an MA in transformational leadership and coaching, MA in psychology, whole brain living certified coach through Dr. Jill Bolt Taylor, Level 3 Breathwork certification through Global Professional Breathwork Alliance, and a BBA in finance and accounting. Welcome, Dr. Lyons.
Thank you so much, Kristin. It's just a pleasure to be on the show.
You have such an impressive background, and I know in prior conversations with you, you started out in finance and accounting and then really moved into the psychology and working with holistic health for individuals as well as families.
I did. Yeah, I know. We were talking about it because I said sometimes on paper, these things look like giant leaps, but there were through lines and interesting connections, because even though I was an economic analyst in personal injury and wrongful death cases, I know the person I worked for was an expert witness economist in showing damages for people who have been personal injury, wrongful death situations. And particularly in the personal injury ones, the facet that always intrigued me the most was the psychological aspect of it. Like, they had to get psychological testing to show what are some ways to measure their loss of value of life.
Yes.
Because, and this is relevant too, because especially for women, because when a jury is going to look at what should somebody be given as an award, or for something like this. And, you're calculating things like wages. So if someone is a full-time mom at home, her wages would basically always get calculated at minimum wage or kind of the lowest house care person. So that was a big disparity between that and someone maybe was injured but had a very high-paying corporate job. And so I love my boss at that time because he was really, he found a way to put a lot more into the formula for how we could show these damages. One was particularly around our emotional and psychological health and the impact that it had. So as I worked in that field, I'm like, where do I want to go? I'm in my 20s. Do I want to pursue becoming an economist and doing what he did? It's like, nope. I am quite clear that's not the path, but I love working with the clients, and and at the same time I was doing my own, growth work and learning and growing. So I found that to be what really pulled at my passion, or what I wanted to do going forward. So that was a longer story than you may have wanted for that. It'll probably tie into what the bigger topic that we're talking about, which is following your intuition.
Yes, it is. Yeah, an incredible story to really find your purpose and passion. And you do work with a variety of individuals, but your focus on your podcast, Rewrite the Mother Code, and your upcoming book is really on that journey of the mother. Yeah. So how did you find your passion in that particular area?
Well, that was a journey as well, Kristin, because as I just shared that story with this boss and the loss of value of life, he was surprisingly if you think about somebody who's an economist or that, but he was the first one to share with me, just working for him and his practice, that he and his wife, for their 2 children, had home births. I didn't even know that existed at that time, right? Like, I was totally poised to be someone who would kind of follow the path of least resistance, or what everybody else is doing, and it's kind of go my way in that. But this was one of those first intuitive sparks, right? Like whoa, something about this feels really good and something is tugging at me here and I want to explore it. Now, there's part of me that's like, oh, I think once I heard that you have more control over the lighting and food in a home birth situation, that might have been all I needed because
Right.
having control of those primal things felt really important. He was that bridge. Then birth of my second child, I stayed working for him up until the birth of our second child. And that's when I'm like, I want to take some time off. And in that interim, kind of decide what my next direction is. There were ways we talked about working together, but just more in the psychology field where I would work directly with the clients in a different way. At the time, I was doing a lot of, like I said, my own growth and personal growth work. But either way, I decided I had a lot of experience and personal experience and work in this field personally, but I wanted to get the academics behind it. So when my
Okay.
daughter was a couple years old is when I decided to get my first master's, and that was a master's degree in psychology. But I focused on family and like how do we maximize potential in family? So it kind of started out more in the family realm for me. And then I went to work part-time at the organization that had been a client at while I was getting my master's. And then
Lovely.
the more,
Okay.
yeah, and then I became a director of a couples and parenting program at that organization. But it and then then we had two daughters and the real focus on so I had some focus, but it was overall with couples parenting, kind of general, but not until I did my doctorate, and I started on that journey in 2013 that I decided I really wanted to hone in on the experience of the mother. I realized that there were choices I made that were really following my intuition and really I felt so good about. And my husband and I were parenting consciously, but along the way, in the heat of it all, I really stopped growing myself. And that's kind of what hit me when I decided I wanted to study that. I wanted to look at like what happens on a mother's journey that you're kind of going strong in this area. And I was, always leading the way in the family for us to our personal and spiritual growth. And then, oh, I don't know, probably a few years into my second daughter's birth, it's more I realized it looking back, even though I had some realization when it was happening. It's like, I think we're just going to put that aside. I think I rationalized it as like I'm busy but really I was scared. Some things change. Now I have a different responsibility. I have these two daughters. I don't want to, my husband has been very amenable to me rocking the boat, putting us in new territory, but I don't know what if he doesn't keep doing that? These are things I've realized like later that were going on with me and just fears and insecurities of new motherhood and all of that. I felt like I had enough to deal with that. So fast forward, now my kids that were about to like I had to start high school and college and it really started to hit me like, wow, I'm surrounded by people in the growth environment. I'm coaching and working in the growth environment and I still struggled to stay with myself, I'll put it, right? And really stay focusing on myself, which is then what I chose to study in my doctorate. And what I realized there are and why I ended up naming it Rewrite the Mother Code is we're wired really strongly from our family upbringings and from our culture on how motherhood should look and choices that we have and what's available to us. And unless you have some inkling that more is possible, we all just kind of follow under whatever that neural wiring is. And those forces
So
are really,
true.
really strong. So,
Society tells us one version of mothering, but
yes.
your journey to helping your clients and your podcast listeners trust their own instincts. I mean, I
Mhm.
am all about that as a doula, so I love your focus.
Yeah, and that's what I love. We talked about this when you were on my podcast is empowering that mother to because she doesn't know she has it unless somebody starts encouraging that out of them, encouraging them to look inside themselves and start attuning to their bodies and all the ways your body's speaking to you, your spirit, just I don't know where that idea came from. And rather than dismiss it, explore it, the kind of thing is what, you're bringing to light there. And that's such a beautiful, one of the things that I think is so powerful and important, having people in your arena and someone like a doula who has trained in it, and has a lot more knowledge and has the capacity to share information across the board on pros and cons of what happens in the hospital to, oh, there are these other, we call them alternative because they're just not as common. But meanwhile, the rest of the world, it's way more common to use midwives and not see birth as a medical emergency or medical event
Exactly.
until it is one, right? And then yay for Western medicine, but it's not that until it is. So help you. Having doulas and midwives in my midst, to this day, I can picture my midwife at various junctures when I didn't think I could do it, or I mean, I was at home, so I didn't have the option of pain medication anyway, but at some of those like really scary point to really hold me in that space of what's possible and empowerment. And I have so much wisdom inside me that I could trust it, that she was there if I said, my intuition's telling me to do this. It's
Right.
something really bizarre. So anyway, yes, I can say more about that, but let me know if that's, where you want me to go.
Oh, yes. I am all about, again, just having experts to rely on. But I feel like we are made to mother. And if
Mm,
you trust your instincts, then and not listen to, say, some of the advice from those mom group or friends and
mhm.
family, and really check yourself with experts or evidence-based information to make
Yeah.
sure that you're right on, because of course things change. I mean, let's look at like everything from safe sleep to car seat safety. I mean, we have to
Oh
keep
my
up with
gosh.
recalls and things as parents to keep our baby or babies safe. But other than that, we know how to care for them and bond
Mhm.
with them and even birth our babies. I mean, women can give birth
Ugh,
in a coma. Our
isn't
body
it
will
amazing?
instinctively push.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I haven't heard that before. I know we can under some extreme circumstances, but that our body will still do that even when we're disconnected
Right.
in
And we'll
that way.
still
That's
have
pretty powerful.
contractions. Our body, yeah, can push.
Really powerful.
So yeah, there's
Well, and
just
that just had me think about how disempowering it is, this wiring in our culture, that we need an expert, that we need an authority, that we can't do this without ourselves. So that's to me heartbreaking because it just can potentially rob a woman of an experience that could be ecstatic, pleasurable, that will have moments of pain, but also moments of pleasure. And even that's not talked about. But I think the biggest disservice is it just gives more data of like why we should turn down or turn off our intuitive sense. Cause like, well, it doesn't really matter. I'll just keep
what
looking
it
outside
does.
myself. And then that gets wired into not just me, the child I'm giving birth to, and then the modeling that I'm showing and giving throughout. Like I even go as far back as preconception to conception through that whole space and span, that if we're disempowered or we're believing that we can't do it, then, when tough stuff comes up in parenting or new motherhood, we won't turn to ourselves first, or, or we'll think we're crazy, or like the things that come up
Right.
when you hear so many stories when moms are so sure that something's wrong with them or the baby, and outside people are telling like, no, you're fine. It's just this or just that. Like I was doing research for I told you this, I'm doing a TEDx talk, which I'm super
Yes.
excited about, and talking about this very topic. And I didn't know that Serena Williams had gone through, just looking for different anecdotes of a
Right.
variety of women. There's countless of them, but how much even though it's a Black woman, because Black women face having to advocate for themselves and have more issues at many times the rate of white women. But even this very well-known superstar had to fight to get heard about symptoms that she was feeling and that she knew was a problem, and had to fight until, like, yes, they found out, like, gee, it turns out you're right. And if she hadn't, could have been potentially dire circumstances.
Yes.
And so it isn't just like, oh yeah, following my intuition is a nice thing. Like, one, it can save our lives. But if we don't feel like our voice is going to get heard, or it's like, well, they know better. And okay, if they say so, if they say I'm fine, like, I want to think I'm fine, but I may not be. And
Right.
we have to practice using it in these, not so stressful or intense situations, so that muscle is already built before, during, and after these kind of events. Like you said, in my podcast, train like you're training for a marathon, train like an athlete, mentally, physically, I say spiritually and emotionally, because not only can it protect us, it can also give us some really incredible, I'm going to say almost otherworldly to ecstatic experiences if we open ourselves to it.
Right. And my parting advice whenever I'm on other podcasts is usually no one knows your body or baby the way
Yes.
that you do. And as you mentioned with the example with Serena Williams, advocate for yourself, speak up,
Right.
because otherwise something can go wrong. Like, your baby and what is normal and abnormal with cries and wet diapers, whatever it might be. And what might be considered something like colic might be beyond that, or with your own health and how you're feeling, especially postpartum, and advocating for yourself. So that is one thing that I will talk about as frequently as I can,
Right,
that
everywhere
we
and
do
anywhere,
know our
right?
bodies. Like, Serena knew her body. She's an elite
Yeah.
athlete.
Well, and she had prior circumstances. It was blood clot issue or a potential
Yes.
pulmonary embolism issue that she had issues with. So
It's in her chart, right?
it's in her chart, right? Like, she's at high risk for something like this. So even with that, right? That isn't demonizing the medical world or anything.
Oh,
Like, we've overwhelmed the medical world so much that they're stretched so thin. It's also, we can't expect them to know everything and anything. And for whatever reasons, at moments sometimes where they're just like, nope, you're fine. I always trust and believe that these care professions have our best interests at heart. It's just there are various challenges in all of them.
exactly. And I love that your training also includes breath work. We have some
Yeah.
doulas on our team that are breath work practitioners. And in fact, in my office, as I look at the sign, it says breathe. And breath
Breathe.
is so essential and can reduce stress
Yeah.
and certainly help with labor and reduce any fear, tension, pain. And
So
so the
true.
fact that you're a breathwork practitioner beyond all of your other degrees is so perfect, because it
Yeah.
is essential in motherhood. I still use hypnobirthing breathing when I'm stuck in traffic or at the dentist. And,
Yes.
that's like one of my fears. I don't love the dentist.
I
So
don't
I'll
know.
use breath work for that to get
Oh, I love
myself
that.
in a calm space.
Hey, Alyssa here. I'm just popping in to tell you about our course called Becoming. Becoming a Mother is your guide to a confident pregnancy and birth, all in a convenient 6-week online program. From birth plans to sleep training and everything in between, you'll gain the confidence and skills you need for a smooth transition to motherhood. Live coaching calls with me and Kristin, tons of expert videos including chiropractic care, pelvic floor physical therapy, mental health experts, breastfeeding, and so much more. You'll also get a private Facebook community with other mothers going through this at the same time as you to offer support and encouragement when you need it most. If you'd like to learn more about the course, you can email us at info@goldcoastdoulas.com or check it out at thebecomingcourse.com. We would love to see you there. We also have a book called Supported, Your Guide to Birth and Baby, which makes a beautiful companion to this course. It's a great book for any expecting mother and is the perfect baby shower gift. You can find information on that book at supportedbook.com.
That's beautiful, Kristin. And yeah, you're bringing that up. Thank you for bringing that up, because it is a practice that's kind of one of my favorite things to do in practice. I do it, this modality, dynamic breath work, and how it involves holotropic breathing, but some variations of that. But I do it with people in the water, on land, and but it made me think about particularly a woman I worked with, that her journey went from when she first got pregnant, and she came from a very scientific background, and she's like, don't even talk to me about any of this natural childbirth stuff. She's like,
Okay.
it's off the table. And I coached them as a couple at the time. And I'm like, that's fine. I said, if there any point you want to discuss it or put, any of that information into the mix, just let me know. And at some point she did. And she came back to me and it's like, okay, so what am I missing? Like, what about this alternative? And so I talked about things like being able to be present and in the moment, to be fully conscious and empowered in that way, because we haven't brought that up, as far as this intuitive sense is a very can bring us to the present moment. And that's what breath work does, right? It really gets you in
Right.
the moment because you're focusing on your breath. So they ended up doing a 180 and shifting from a very traditional birth to midwives in a hospital. And this was only like, probably it was in their third trimester somewhere that they decided to do this. But then
Okay.
she reached out. She's like, I think I'd like to do a breath work, I facilitated breath work for her and her husband at the same time, because she's like, I'm starting to get really scared. I don't know if I can do this kind of thing. And I know I turned toward it, but maybe I can't. Anyway, we do this breath work and she comes out of it. She's like, oh my God. She said, I realized that I'm not afraid of the pain. I can handle that. She said, I'm afraid of the aliveness and the energy
Mhm.
and this full bodied experience that I'm going to have. Like, can I handle it? And it was so
Mhm.
beautiful, because without breath work, it still would have been in her head that she was just afraid of the pain. And not that we can't be afraid of pain, but once she tapped into that, took her into an awareness and into a reality of then when she did go into labor, to open herself to that and trust, and how much, once we follow an intuitive sense, to then keep trusting ourselves, such that this was a birth I was supposed to be at. She labored at home, and then she's like, okay, we're going to make our way to the hospital. By the time I got to the hospital, things had gone so well. She's like sitting there, like blissful, holding her new
Oh,
baby. And her
the way
husband
it
was
was
just like,
meant to be. That's what
right?
I believe.
I
Yes.
know. So the power of breath work is where we're getting with that, right?
Yeah.
Like, because in my world, it's about getting us out of our head, into our bodies, letting we trap emotions in our molecules that have been there, well, I think generationally, but even, in
Agreed.
this lifetime, that, when we breathe into those, people have remembered their births in breath work. They've gone back and have validated evidence, like they pictured the whole thing. I've done breath work where I've literally tasted smoke in my mouth, and my mom was a smoker while she was pregnant.
Oh,
And
wow.
these are the kinds of things, it's like, why? And I know you and I are so aligned in this, like, why isn't this mainstream? This isn't weird woo-woo stuff, right?
No,
Like,
not at all.
it's just our bodies and it's possibilities.
Yes.
So
And
anyway,
I
yeah,
would
you
love
go.
to address, with breath work and a calm, intuitive space,
Mm,
how not only the well being of the mother can be affected, but how that impacts the baby in the
mm,
postnatal phase and in the womb, honestly, with the
right?
lack of stress, anxiety, fear. The baby picks up on all of that.
All of that, right? And think about the gift that you're giving. Like we all say, we want to be the best mother, parent, we can be. Well, any of these things that we're doing for ourselves, like calming our own nervous system. So I look at it two ways. It's like, one, just physiologically, like going from a high anxiety space to a calm space through our breath, especially the baby in utero, but then beyond, like they're so sensitive. They pick up on it for and we all are, right? We're all picking up on the energy and anxiety and atmospheres of people around us, but we're
Right.
particularly open and sensitive in those spaces. So not only are we spreading that because it's contagious, that's proven, but we're modeling, right? We're modeling for our child, like, oh, mommy takes care of herself. Like, I'm going to be safe. Like, yay, it's okay. Even though the world says I'm supposed to sacrifice or give myself over, my mom is modeling putting her care high up on the priority list, right? And I think that's one of the biggest gifts we can pass down and break some of that generational thinking and beliefs that some of those arenas that we've, are a part of for so long. And we can shift whole systems by doing that. And that's what I think is additionally powerful.
100%. So, Dr. Lyons, what are your top tips for our listeners to really trust their own intuition as a mother and begin that process, even preconception, of understanding intuitive mothering?
Yeah, such a great question, Kristen. And I mean, I'll start with like one thing. Like there are now books written on this, there are studies have been done. So if it's kind of like where you're inclined to explore, right? If you're someone like, oh,
Sure.
I anywhere from I'm a skeptic to the first way I like to learn about something place is to find the data on it and always be open to looking at both sides. Like intuitive think decision making is bonkers to no, the most trusted form of decision making you should follow. And then second, may seem a little bit different, but you brought it up with the breath work, but this tuning into our body and our emotions are directly tied to having access to our intuition. Because sometimes we get like maybe a light bulb of a idea or something, or you hear about something, you're like, oh, that's like lighting kind of a spark. So rather than put the flame out of that or rationalize that away because it's not in your normal sphere, tune into like where do you feel that in your body? And what emotions come up when you think about, if I use the example with this client of mine that went from so sure she was going to do it this way, but something clicked for her and she followed it, right? So she had that inclination and she followed it. But some of that was tuning into her emotions and her body. So start to really, I always love I find a connection to this practice no matter what the question of like how to's is, which is spending some moments in your day just asking yourself, what, where have I felt what am I feeling in this moment? Right. So that practice is that moment. Like right now, I'm feeling joy because I'm talking to you and excited to talk about this.
Right. Mindfulness in a way. Sure.
Right. So the mindfulness, but naming, and this is something you can do then with your family, with your spouse, with yourself, where at some point in the day, like we would do this at the dinner table, and everyone would have a chance to share where did they feel, I call them 5 primary emotions: fear, hurt, anger, sadness, and joy. And just name one time in your day that you were feeling all the time. So whenever my kids would say, I didn't have fear, it's like, yes, you did. Just like find it.
Right.
That connection is a really critical one. And we've gotten so programmed out of honoring our emotions that it makes it difficult to then follow our intuitive senses. So I tried to make that not too complicated, but also at least like a literal practice that we can do.
I'll try that at the dinner table. I love that discussion point.
Yeah, and we started before when our kids were babies and not talking yet, and he and I would do it, so we were modeling it, right? And I'm
Right.
certainly not going to say my kids throughout their upbringing were always like, "Yay!" Sometimes like, "No, I don't want to." But I'll tell you, they're in their 20s now, and they are so grateful to have that training and that social emotional intelligence, I guess we would name it, just that they know that practice was a big part of it.
I love it so much. So, how can our listeners connect with you, Dr. Lyons?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So everything that's kind of going on can be found on my website, which is www.dr for the doctor, drgertrudelyons.com. I know it'll be in the show notes. In there, you'll see my podcast, Rewrite the Mother Code, but that can be found anywhere you listen to podcasts. I'm getting a page up for my upcoming book, which launches in May, but you can sign up for my newsletter which I put out a couple times a month. And there's a way you can do that on my website. And then you'll find out when all the things that are going to happen in between now and May 6th, when my book, Rewrite the Mother Code, From Sacrifice to Stardust, A Cosmic Approach to Motherhood, hits the stand. So so those are the ways.
So exciting. And then I will be on the lookout for your TED Talk. I'm
Oh,
sure
yeah.
that'll be on your website.
It'll, of course, it'll take a prominent spot. Yeah, that happens in February. And I've been told it can take, I don't know, anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks for it to go up on the TED or, YouTube or where it can be found. But I'm excited, scared and excited.
I'm excited for you.
Thank
and
you.
Your favorite social media channels for our listeners?
Oh, yeah. Social media, Instagram, Pinterest, and LinkedIn are where I mainly have a presence.
Perfect. And that would be under...
Oh, those are all, sorry. Everything is like at drgertrudelyons.com. Not .com, at Gertrude Lyons.
Well, thank you for sharing your wisdom. And
it's been such a blessing to be with you.
Yes, there's so many directions we can go. So I'll have to have you on again in the future.
Same with you on mine. Absolutely, Kristin. Thank you.
Thank you. Take good care.
Thanks for listening to Ask the Doulas. For more information about Gold Coast Doulas, visit us on our website, goldcoastdoulas.com. We're also on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and give us a 5-star review. Thank you. Remember, these moments are golden.